Carrollton wasn't known for homicides. It was the kind of place where people left their car doors unlocked and waved at neighbors from across manicured lawns. But that illusion broke on a quiet Friday afternoon in early October 2020. A young woman was found inside her parked car, her body slumped sideways across the center console. Blood had soaked through the driver's seat and pooled beneath the door. Her name was Alyssa Burkett. She was 24 years old. Just hours earlier, she'd told her coworker she'd be right back. Alyssa clocked out at 4:45 p.m. as confirmed by her company's internal time log system. A security camera mounted above the employee entrance recorded her leaving alone, no one trailing her, no apparent urgency. She crossed the lot with keys in hand, heading toward her vehicle in her usual parking spot. By 5:03 p.m., she was the subject of a 911 call. "There's a woman in her car," the caller said, breathless. "There's blood, a lot of blood. I think she's dead." Patrol units arrived by 5:12. Her vehicle was unlocked. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass. Her purse remained in the passenger seat. Her phone, screen cracked but still functional, was wedged between the seat and console. There was no movement. Her body had gone cold. First responders noted an entry wound at her left temple. A single gunshot, close range. But that wasn't all. Lacerations across her neck and chest, 43 in total, as the medical examiner would later confirm, suggested a frenzied follow-up attack with a short blade. Several wounds were defensive. She had tried to fight, briefly. At 6:20 p.m., the coroner declared her deceased on scene. The crime scene was sterile in its precision. No weapon was recovered, no shell casings. Tire treads near her vehicle matched multiple employee cars. Surveillance from a nearby fast food chain revealed a dark SUV had idled in a neighboring lot for nearly 90 minutes before driving away just minutes after the estimated time of death. The plate was unreadable, the driver's face obscured. A pair of latex gloves was found discarded in a storm drain 1 block south. One glove bore a drop of blood. DNA confirmed it belonged to Alyssa. The gloves were logged, sealed, and sent for trace analysis. No fingerprints, no hair strands, no eyewitnesses, no signs of a struggle outside the car. Whoever committed this crime didn't just prepare, they timed it, rehearsed it. Detective Sergeant Leah Ramirez with Carrollton Police put it plainly. This wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive, it was a hit. Alyssa Burkett wasn't a known drug dealer, didn't associate with gangs, and had no criminal record. She worked in property management. She lived in a modest apartment. She was a single mother to a toddler named Willow. Investigators began with the most immediate line of questioning. Who had access to her schedule? Who knew where she worked? Who would want her gone? A review of her recent police reports revealed something alarming. In the 3 months prior to her death, Alyssa had made at least 2 reports of being followed. She claimed her tires had been slashed. Her voicemail inbox contained at least 4 anonymous threats, disjointed but menacing. She even suspected someone had placed a tracker on her car. None of those reports had led to arrests. No suspects were identified. There was no hard proof, just suspicions, paper trails, and unease. Her employer described her as quiet, private, and sharp when she needed to be. But behind that professionalism was a custody battle still making its way through Texas family court. Alyssa had recently been awarded near full custody of her 2-year-old daughter. That decision hadn't gone over well with the child's father, but names weren't being released yet. The department was careful. As one investigator put it, "We don't build a case on motive. We build it on facts. And right now, we have very few." Digital forensics analysts began extracting data from Alyssa's phone. Her last received text was at 3:58 p.m. from the daycare. She hadn't responded. Her internet browser history showed a weather check and a quick search for child support court holidays. There were no outgoing calls after 3:12 p.m. What stood out wasn't what was there, but what wasn't. No signs of panic, no missed calls to emergency contacts, no last message, just silence. Then nothing. By midnight, crime scene techs had completed their sweep. A single strand of synthetic fiber, black coarse, was lifted from the passenger seat headrest. It didn't match any clothing Alyssa was wearing. It was bagged and sent to the lab. The working theory: someone had been waiting, someone who knew her schedule, someone who knew just how long it would take for the lot to empty after closing, someone who came prepared to end her life and disappear within 10 minutes. The motive was beginning to form, but a motive doesn't hold up in court. What the team needed now was the forensic thread that would tie everything together. And so they went looking for it. 2 days after Alyssa Burkett's body was found, A digital forensics team began extracting records from her devices, email accounts, and online activity. Investigators weren't just looking for a motive. They were hunting for predictive markers, evidence that this crime had been planned long before it was committed. The earliest red flag dated back nearly 3 months prior. On July 13, 2020, Alyssa filed a police report claiming someone had slashed the rear tires of her car outside her apartment complex. Photos she submitted showed 2 deliberate incisions near the valve stems, consistent with a small blade, not random debris. No cameras had covered the area, and there were no witnesses. The report was logged and closed with no suspect identified. Less than 2 weeks later, she returned to the police with a new concern. She believed someone was following her after work. She described a dark SUV seen idling outside her office building on multiple evenings. On one occasion, she noted that the vehicle changed lanes to follow her down the George Bush Turnpike before turning off near her complex. No license plate was obtained. Officers suggested she vary her routine, report any further sightings, and consider requesting a protective order if she could identify the person responsible. She never filed one. By mid-August, Alyssa had told friends she was keeping detailed notes on everything weird, as she put it. She recorded timestamps, vehicle sightings, odd phone calls with no caller ID, and instances where she believed she was being surveilled. She emailed the list to herself weekly. The final entry was dated September 29th, 3 days before her murder. It read, "Car was parked near my complex again, engine running, same SUV, same feeling." That same week, she had brought her car to a mechanic after suspecting someone had tampered with it. The technician discovered a small black box beneath the rear bumper, affixed with a magnet. The item was not reported to police at the time. It was discarded. Investigators recovered the mechanic's work order during a sweep of her personal files. When re-interviewed, he described the device as about the size of a deck of cards, with a blue indicator light that blinked intermittently. The description was consistent with commercially available GPS trackers. Parallel to these findings, detectives conducted a background review on Alyssa's legal history. She was engaged in a high-conflict custody case regarding her 2-year-old daughter. Court filings from May to September 2020 revealed multiple emergency petitions, most filed by Alyssa seeking sole conservatorship. Her filings alleged inconsistent visitation compliance, verbal harassment, and controlling behavior by the father of her child. Court records also showed that in early September, Alyssa had been awarded primary custody, with the child's father permitted only limited supervised visitation. The ruling had been contested and was under appeal at the time of her death. According to legal correspondence recovered from her work inbox, the next court date had been scheduled for October 6th, 4 days after she was killed. Detective Ramirez flagged a pattern that mirrored other domestic-related homicides she'd investigated. What begins in courtrooms often ends in morgues. You get a window into someone's desperation, and sometimes that's all it takes. Digital messages stored in Alyssa's Google account confirmed rising tension in the weeks leading up to her murder. Voicemails transcribed by automated services included one message left on August 21st. "You're going to regret this. You can't keep her from me forever." The number was masked but routed through a prepaid wireless carrier with no subscriber identity. Another message, recorded on September 15th, simply stated, "Watch yourself, every day." That one came from a number later found to be inactive, consistent with a burner phone. Investigators attempted to subpoena IP logs from her social media platforms. Some login attempts traced back to Alyssa's known devices, but several logins in early September originated from outside the city, one pinged in McKinney, another in Arlington, locations she had no known ties to. The theory emerged that someone had been monitoring her accounts remotely. The platforms complied with data retention requests. What became clear was that Alyssa had sensed escalation. Her coworkers mentioned she had changed her routine, parking in different spaces each week, varying her departure times. She even began locking her car doors while driving, which friends said she had never done before. Yet she had kept most of her fears to herself. There was no formal protective order on file. No ongoing criminal case, no suspect named. For investigators, this presented a tactical problem. The threats were vague, the digital trails were partial, and the behavior changes, while significant, did not amount to actionable leads on their own. But there was something else, something the tech team flagged in her phone's location history. In late September, Alyssa's device had registered a signal anomaly. On 3 separate occasions, her GPS logs had duplicated her location before correcting themselves. Forensic analysts determined this could happen if a third-party device was emitting a false signal to mimic or confuse the phone's internal GPS, an advanced method of surveillance not commonly seen in domestic cases. This discovery prompted investigators to revisit the theory that she had in fact been tracked through her movements, even without her knowledge. And if someone had gone to that extent before killing her, it changed the nature of the case entirely. This wasn't impulsive. This was targeted, technological, and methodical. And the person behind it had planned for Alyssa to never leave that parking lot alive. The vehicle where Alyssa Burkett was murdered had already been processed once. Initial evidence had been bagged and logged. But on October 4th, less than 48 hours into the investigation, a secondary forensic sweep was ordered. Not because of missed protocol, but because the method of the attack suggested more planning than what the surface traces showed. The driver's side door handle bore a partial smudge. It had no ridge detail, just enough surface contact to warrant swabbing. The lab confirmed the smudge was a combination of skin oil and a commercial-grade cream makeup, thicker than foundation, often used in theatrical or disguise applications. It was consistent with the residue found on the discarded glove retrieved from the adjacent storm drain. From the rear passenger seat, crime scene techs collected a synthetic fiber. Under microscope, it was determined to be part of a low-cost, mass-manufactured wig made from mod acrylic, commonly used in Halloween or disguise products. The fiber matched the black strand found on the headrest in the initial sweep. A shoe print was also recovered beneath a thin layer of dried blood on the pavement beside the vehicle. It was barely visible during the original assessment. Once enhanced through luminol and infrared photography, the outsole pattern became distinct, hexagonal lugs with a fractured edge. The tread matched a discontinued work boot, sold primarily through a warehouse retailer with limited distribution in Texas. A request was sent to manufacturers for recent buyer records of that boot model. Most stores did not retain detailed transaction logs due to the lack of serialized SKU tracking. However, one retailer in Denton flagged a purchase made 2 months earlier, paid for in cash, no loyalty card, no receipt retained. The clerk remembered the buyer only because they had asked whether the boots would leave clean prints. The observation was anecdotal and not admissible in court, but it was flagged. The most significant finding came from the car's undercarriage. Investigators retrieved a small adhesive magnet, slightly rusted, with fragments of plastic housing still attached. It appeared to have broken off recently. The fragment was consistent with tracker casing design and correlated with Alyssa's earlier mechanic report. Analysts attempted to restore the digital serial imprint from the remaining casing, but were unsuccessful due to degradation. This fragment was the strongest physical indication that Alyssa's movements had been tracked, not digitally through spyware, physically, by device. That detail alone elevated the nature of the crime. It wasn't simply a domestic killing. It was a planned event requiring coordination, patience, and equipment. An examination of nearby parking lots yielded an additional clue. A business 2 buildings down from Alyssa's workplace had a CCTV unit mounted on a pole facing the road. Although not directly aimed at her office complex, it captured vehicles entering and exiting the back access lane. At 3:41 p.m. on the day of her death, a black SUV pulled in. The driver sat inside for 90 minutes without exiting. The car never moved, never blinked its headlights. At 5:01, less than 2 minutes after Alyssa was last seen alive, it drove off. The license plate was unreadable, partially obscured by a reflective plate cover. But the vehicle was unique. A distinct front bumper scrape on the passenger side had exposed primer underneath. Analysts enhanced the footage and submitted the pattern to a nationwide vehicle damage database used by insurance investigators and repo firms. 5 matches were returned. 1 was from a vehicle involved in a minor collision in Plano, Texas, 6 weeks earlier. That vehicle was registered to a residential address under a female name. Investigators flagged it, but no contact was made yet. No suspects had been identified. No names confirmed. Detective Ramirez noted a pattern forming. It wasn't about what was left behind, she said in her report. It was about how carefully most of it had been removed. The glove, the tracker, the prints, what remained? Only what they didn't anticipate: residue, fiber, tread. Lab results on the latex glove confirmed the blood was Alyssa's. No foreign DNA was recovered from the interior of the glove, indicating it had likely been worn with care or wiped down before disposal. No hair follicles, no skin flakes. Whoever left it knew what they were doing. Inside the vehicle, the passenger seat belt had been pulled across but not latched. Forensics found microscopic blood droplets on the fabric, indicating the belt had been in contact with an open wound or transfer event. The droplets were angled in a way suggesting lateral movement, consistent with someone climbing over the console or reaching in from the passenger side. This conflicted with early theories that the attack occurred entirely from the driver's side. Investigators revised their timeline. If the shooter had accessed the vehicle from the passenger side, possibly while Alyssa was seated, engine on, then the killer had to have been waiting close by, not approaching from a distance. It also meant that Alyssa likely never saw them coming. That theory aligned with her lack of physical resistance and the absence of forward movement captured on CCTV. She never tried to run. There were no brake marks, no defensive injuries beyond the arm wounds incurred after the stabbing began. The autopsy report showed the gunshot came first. The blade followed, rapid, repetitive, intentional. In towns like Carrollton, where violence tends to be domestic and impulsive, that level of method was rare. In this case, it wasn't just rare. It was tactical. Someone didn't just want Alyssa dead. They wanted no trace of who did it. On the fourth day of the investigation, detectives narrowed their scope to a different layer of evidence: digital footprints. Unlike fibers or shoe prints, digital data often reveals not only where a person has been, but who has been watching them. Alyssa Burkett's phone, recovered at the crime scene, had already been unlocked during the initial forensic sweep. Her call logs, messaging apps, and browser history were extracted and preserved. But what stood out most to digital forensics wasn't just what Alyssa had done, but what had been done to her devices without her consent. Specialists pulled a complete activity log from her phone's GPS and Bluetooth history. Over the previous 6 weeks, multiple pings appeared from unknown devices near her phone, some at distances consistent with proximity-based trackers, others indicating potential network spoofing. 3 MAC addresses, unique identifiers for devices, had appeared near Alyssa's phone more than 12 times in separate locations, outside her home, her office, her child's daycare. These MAC addresses were flagged and submitted to a regional tech crime unit. One of those devices, a low-range Bluetooth scanner, was later matched to a surveillance kit sold through a private seller on an online forum. The kit included a tracker, receiver, signal jammer, and burner smartphone preloaded with anonymizing software. A recent PayPal transaction tied to the sale had been completed by a user profile operating under an alias, Thermoptic88. The account was less than 2 months old and had no transaction history beyond that one purchase. Digital records from Alyssa's iCloud backup revealed a series of deleted texts, recovered by the forensic toolset. Several had been erased within 24 hours of her death. The deleted messages were fragments of conversations, some mundane, others more alarming. August 28, 3:12 p.m. From Alyssa to an unsaved number. Stop circling the lot. I've already called the police. Don't come near me or Willow again. September 3rd, 9:47 a.m. To same number. I'm blocking you. This is harassment. Next time I'll file a report. No replies were recovered from the corresponding number, which had been deactivated shortly after her murder. The digital forensics team also examined usage patterns from her work computer. A total of 13 login attempts had occurred after hours over the course of 2 months, several from IP addresses originating in other cities. The logins targeted cloud documents related to her legal case and personal calendar. While none of these logins changed or deleted data, the access suggested someone had insight into Alyssa's movements and appointments. More significant was a pattern in her phone's background app refresh activity. Applications such as her calendar, maps, and notes were being accessed remotely, something only possible through device mirroring or unauthorized cloud access. Investigators reviewed Alyssa's 2-factor authentication logs. There had been at least 4 login attempts that triggered verification messages, none of which she responded to. One occurred on September 25th at 11:02 p.m., hours after she had gone to sleep according to text records. The IP address on that attempt was traced to a residential network 40 miles outside Carrollton. It was not her home, her workplace, or any location in her known routine. The implication: someone had attempted to compromise her phone, more than once. Digital forensics flagged an additional anomaly. Just 2 days before her death, Alyssa's Apple ID settings showed the presence of a new trusted device, added briefly, then removed. The name of the device was iPad, 2nd gen, but the device's serial number had never been registered under Alyssa's accounts. The window of access lasted no more than 40 minutes. Analysts believed this reflected either an error in Apple's device registry or deliberate spoofing to clone or view her synced data. The latter was more likely. Meanwhile, her financial statements showed a $34.99 purchase from a site known to sell hidden surveillance apps, processed through a prepaid Visa card. The card was purchased at a pharmacy in Denton. CCTV from the store was requested. A male subject, wearing a black cap and gray mask, was seen purchasing 2 prepaid cards and leaving without further engagement. The footage quality was low. No facial recognition hit could be made. Investigators cross-referenced this with credit bureau data to search for overlapping online activity, device registrations, burner phones, VoIP numbers, but the trail was thin. Whoever orchestrated the tracking had done so with a deliberate effort to avoid detection. However, one small misstep surfaced. An inactive Gmail account used to register the Thermoptic88 PayPal profile had, in 2019, been used briefly on a shared public computer in a public library. Logs preserved by the library's IT system matched the user session to a library card number. That number led to a female account holder with no prior criminal history. But the name was not unknown to investigators. It appeared in earlier custody hearing transcripts. The name wasn't formally released, not yet. The detectives weren't ready to move, but the link was documented and quietly escalated. At this point, the digital trail revealed a pattern. Alyssa's location had been monitored, her communication intercepted, and her cloud data breached. It was no longer a case of someone simply following her. This was active targeting, with layered digital surveillance likely performed by more than one party or with technical assistance. Investigators amended their case theory. The murder was not spontaneous. It followed a trajectory of digital harassment, cloud intrusion, physical monitoring, and psychological pressure, culminating in an ambush. What had looked like an isolated act was now being treated as the final move in a campaign. If someone went to this extent, it wasn't just personal, it was strategic. By the 5th day of the investigation, detectives had sifted through the digital violations, the GPS anomalies, and the fragments of physical evidence. But one piece of the puzzle remained frustratingly vague. The black SUV caught loitering in the area for nearly 90 minutes before Alyssa Burkett was killed. That vehicle had never been traced, the license plate obscured, the driver hidden behind tinted glass. But now, with new access to private business surveillance systems near the crime scene, investigators hoped for a breakthrough. A mid-range security camera mounted outside a dental office across the street had captured the SUV from a different angle. The timestamp confirmed it. The vehicle had entered the parking corridor at 3:41 p.m. and didn't move until 5:01 p.m., exactly 2 minutes after Alyssa's confirmed time of death. While the camera resolution was limited, analysts at the Texas Department of Public Safety used frame stacking software to enhance the footage. With dozens of sequential frames stabilized, a partial image of the front passenger side bumper was reconstructed. It revealed a unique feature, a diagonal scrape exposing silver primer beneath the paint, matching the damaged SUV previously identified from insurance records in Chapter 3. Investigators revisited the insurance claim tied to the damaged SUV from Plano. That vehicle was registered to a woman named Holly Elkins, a 29-year-old with no prior arrests. Her name had appeared in earlier court filings, specifically in association with the father of Alyssa's daughter. Now the name was coming into sharper focus. Detectives obtained additional footage from the commercial plaza where Alyssa worked. The front entrance of the building didn't yield anything new, but a side alley camera previously dismissed due to angle and glare was reanalyzed. On closer review, it captured a fleeting reflection in a tinted office window just after 4:55 p.m., a person approaching Alyssa's vehicle from the passenger side. No facial detail, no distinct clothing, but enough body movement to confirm that the killer had approached from the side opposite the driver's seat, consistent with the blood spatter found on the passenger seat belt in Chapter 3. This new positioning ruled out the theory that the killer had waited inside Alyssa's vehicle. Instead, they had waited nearby, possibly inside the black SUV, exited quietly, and approached just after Alyssa entered her car. Investigators cross-referenced this movement with the recovered fragment from the GPS tracker housing found under Alyssa's car. The brand was traced back to an importer that sold primarily through online marketplaces. A purchase record revealed a transaction involving the same model shipped to a P.O. box in Frisco, Texas. The box was registered under a business account, the same account linked to Holly Elkins' wedding planning service. This was the first direct physical link tying Holly Elkins to any of the forensic components of the crime. When questioned, Elkins denied owning a black SUV. However, DMV records contradicted that claim. She had registered a black Ford Escape 2 years earlier and filed a minor accident claim on it 6 weeks before the murder. Detectives retrieved mobile phone tower data for her known number. On the afternoon of the murder, her phone had been turned off for a 5-hour window, from 2:12 p.m. to 7:23 p.m., a gap that included the entire span of the crime. When the device came back online, it pinged a tower near her home address. Meanwhile, surveillance from a gas station 10 minutes from the murder site showed that same black SUV pulling into a pump bay at 2:36 p.m., shortly before its time-stamped appearance near Alyssa's office. The driver was wearing a surgical mask and dark hoodie, no visible license plate, but the bumper scrape was identical. Now, investigators had time, place, and vehicle match, all aligning with a person who had known access to Alyssa's schedule and known involvement in her legal disputes. The picture was growing clearer. What wasn't yet certain was whether Holly Elkins had acted alone. To explore that angle, detectives pulled CCTV footage from a commercial park where the SUV had reportedly been seen in weeks prior. Surveillance logs showed the vehicle parked on multiple dates near the daycare Alyssa used for her child. None of those visits aligned with Holly Elkins' known business activity. On 2 occasions, the vehicle remained stationary for over 90 minutes without the driver exiting. Investigators began to consider the possibility of surveillance rotations, someone scouting, someone else driving, someone else possibly executing. But one fact stood out. The SUV wasn't just a getaway car. It was mobile surveillance, operating over weeks, parked at key locations, disappearing without trace until now. With this chain of footage, commercial plaza, dental office, gas station, daycare, detectives built a movement profile for the SUV and overlaid it with Alyssa's GPS data. The overlaps were too frequent to be coincidental, and now, with Elkins's connection to the vehicle, her denial of ownership became a liability rather than a defense. A search warrant was filed. On October 7th, at precisely 6:10 a.m., a multi-unit law enforcement team executed a search warrant at the registered residence of Holly Elkins in Denton County, Texas. The warrant was granted based on vehicle identification, proximity to the crime scene, financial purchase data tied to surveillance equipment, and suspicious digital activity linking her business account to the GPS tracker used on Alyssa Burkett's car. The operation was deliberate. Officers approached in 2 unmarked vehicles, blocking the driveway to prevent movement of the black Ford Escape listed under her name. The SUV was parked at the edge of the garage, partially concealed under a tarp, further raising suspicion. Elkins was home at the time. She was taken into custody without resistance for questioning. She was not under arrest. The Ford Escape was immediately towed for forensic processing. Inside, crime scene technicians documented several key observations. The interior had been recently cleaned, with visible residue from a commercial-grade upholstery detergent. However, luminol testing revealed trace biological material along the floor mat of the front passenger side and on the rear seat seam. Samples were collected and sealed for analysis. In the trunk, beneath a removable liner, investigators found a pair of nitrile gloves, a half-used roll of black electrical tape, and a torn shipping label bearing a partial sender's address. The address led back to a storage facility rented under a name not matching Elkins. However, billing records for that unit listed her debit card. Detectives then began their sweep of the house. In a small side office connected to the living room, they recovered a personal laptop registered to Elkins. Initial access revealed that the hard drive had been wiped 2 days prior. A forensic data recovery team imaged the drive for deep analysis. A second, older laptop was found inside a locked cabinet. That device was functional and had not been recently accessed. Within its directories, investigators found cached login data associated with the alias Thermoptic88, the same profile used to purchase surveillance equipment tied to Alyssa's stalking. In another room, officers located a plastic container labeled event supplies. Inside were various tools that had no immediate relevance to wedding planning. These included a disposable burner phone, two pairs of costume eyeglasses without prescription lenses, and a black synthetic wig, matching the fibers recovered from Alyssa's car in Chapter 3. The burner phone had been powered off, but once connected for imaging, the contents revealed a text message history with another number, one registered to an account linked to a male subject previously identified in custody filings as Alyssa's former partner. Detectives cross-referenced that number with geolocation data. The device had pinged near the crime scene on the day of the murder, between 4:45 p.m. and 5:10 p.m., the exact time frame of the attack. The discovery changed the direction of the case. This wasn't just about a single person monitoring Alyssa's life. It was about coordination, the forensic link between Elkins and the vehicle, the surveillance devices, and now direct communication with a second party placed her not as a bystander, but as a participant. At headquarters, Elkins was interviewed under the presence of counsel. She denied involvement in the murder and claimed the SUV had not been driven for weeks. When presented with surveillance placing the vehicle near the scene, she offered no explanation. When asked about the burner phone and surveillance purchases, she invoked her Fifth Amendment right. At the lab, analysts continued examining the blood trace found in the SUV's interior. The DNA was confirmed as a match to Alyssa Burkett. This discovery placed her biological material inside a vehicle registered to a person who had denied all contact and proximity. In tandem, the GPS unit fragment recovered earlier was matched to a model sold only through a limited number of resellers. Purchase logs revealed a transaction made using the same prepaid Visa card recovered in her office's shredded trash, a crucial oversight. The last 4 digits on the receipt matched the purchase of the device used to track Alyssa's movement. Meanwhile, the recovered wig fiber was submitted to the FBI's Hair and Fiber Unit in Quantico for confirmatory analysis. The chemical composition matched not just the material from the car, but a specific dye lot used in a limited run of synthetic disguises distributed through a Dallas-area costume supplier. Forensic computer analysts also retrieved deleted files from the older laptop's browsing history, including cache pages from a firearms training forum and step-by-step guides on how to spoof GPS data on iPhones. All of this formed a clear forensic matrix. Each piece, standing alone, was suggestive. Together it was damning, but the question remained. Was Elkins the primary orchestrator, or was she carrying out someone else's plan? Investigators prepared for a second warrant. This time, it would target the other number, the person who may have supplied motive, access, and knowledge of Alyssa's routines. And if that lead held, the case would no longer hinge on digital footprints and circumstantial links. It would turn into a conspiracy. 2 weeks after the search of Holly Elkins's residence, the investigation pivoted toward a second suspect, one long in the periphery of the case, but never formally confronted. Alyssa Burkett's former partner, the father of her child, had previously denied any knowledge of her death beyond what he read in the news. But digital forensics painted a different picture. A secondary search warrant was executed at his apartment in Plano. Detectives recovered a personal laptop, 2 cell phones, and a work-issued tablet. Among the recovered devices, one smartphone contained deleted text chains with a number linked to Elkins's burner phone. Forensic analysis recovered timestamps and content fragments confirming active coordination during the days leading up to Alyssa's death. One message, recovered from encrypted backups, read, "Make sure it's clean. No mistakes this time." Sent on October 1st, 4 days before Alyssa was killed. In his garage, officers found a box containing packaging material for the same GPS model used under Alyssa's vehicle. A second box held receipts for multiple prepaid phones. These had been activated weeks apart, one of which was traced to signal activity near Alyssa's office. Data logs confirmed that both suspects had communicated through anonymized channels, using VPNs and unregistered VoIP lines. During interrogation, the suspect claimed he had no knowledge of Elkins's intentions. He described their relationship as casual, insisting he had no idea what she was doing. But when confronted with the metadata from the burner phone, inconsistencies emerged. He couldn't explain why his device had pinged from the same cell tower as Elkins's on the day of the murder, or why one of his backup cloud folders contained a copy of Alyssa's shared custody calendar. Investigators now had evidence of coordination, motive, and deliberate concealment. The case shifted from isolated homicide to premeditated conspiracy. The Denton County District Attorney's Office moved swiftly. Prosecutors assembled a case file that spanned more than 900 pages of forensic reports, surveillance timelines, text records, and sworn affidavits. The charges against Elkins: first-degree murder, unlawful surveillance, tampering with evidence; against the ex-partner, conspiracy to commit murder, accessory before the fact, obstruction. A grand jury was convened within 10 days. Witnesses included digital forensic analysts, crime scene technicians, and Alyssa's co-worker who had helped her report stalking incidents weeks before her death. When presented with the full digital trail, metadata, cell tower logs, DNA, and the SUV, jurors returned indictments for both. Elkins entered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence with possibility of parole after 35 years. The ex-partner, maintaining his innocence, stood trial 6 months later. The trial was brief but thorough. Prosecutors presented the full scope of digital intrusion. Alyssa's phone mirrored, her location tracked, and her death timed to a planned surveillance drop. The defense argued there was no physical evidence placing the ex-partner at the scene, but prosecutors showed he had funded the tracking devices, directed the purchase of the burner phone, and shared knowledge of Alyssa's schedule only available through unauthorized access. The jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. At the sentencing, Alyssa's mother read a prepared statement. It was short and direct. "My daughter was hunted, and it wasn't just one person holding the weapon." Community reaction was swift. The story led local news for days, not only because of its brutality, but because of its chilling, methodical nature. Many were left asking how a system of shared custody and co-parenting had concealed a storm of obsession and planning. Lawmakers in Texas revisited legislation around GPS stalking and digital privacy. A proposed bill, nicknamed Alyssa's Law, called for increased regulation of commercial tracking devices and harsher penalties for unregistered surveillance. Justice, in a technical sense, was served. But it didn't bring back Alyssa. Her story became a case study at multiple law enforcement seminars across the state. For the officers who worked the case, it was a reminder of how modern crimes are rarely confined to fingerprints or alibis. They unfold through code, signal, and silence. In the end, what happened to Alyssa Burkett wasn't just a crime. It was a devastating failure of awareness, protection, and trust. I share this story not just to recount the facts, but to remind us all. Digital abuse is real. Stalking isn't always in the shadows, and sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who quietly orchestrate our fall. If this case taught me anything, it's that paying attention to the small red flags could mean everything. Speak up, document everything, and never downplay your instincts. If this video moved you or made you think, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from or what part hit hardest. If you didn't like it, I still want to hear why. Your feedback helps me grow. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so you never miss the stories that matter most.